Hi everyone, it's Maud here again, and welcome to our final of 3 lessons exploring the arc of a love story through different women from opera and classical music. Today we've come to the final part of our journey, and we're going to be looking at the Countess from Le Nozze di Figaro, The Marriage of Figaro by Mozart. You'll remember over the first couple of weeks that we started with Gretchen from Schubert's Gretchen am Spinnrad, and in this particular song, which wasn't an aria, it was a song, we were looking at a girl who was really young and it was her first time in love. She was really innocent, she was really excited, she was really obsessive, she just had never experienced any of these emotions before. Then we went last week into Musetta, who was the kind of rock star of male-female relationships, who had been romantic with Marcello the painter for a little while, and they were kind of in that fiery, tempestuous stage of their relationship where they fight all the time, but they make up all the time, very passionate, very in love with each other. And then the last person that we come to is the Countess. And the Countess is a really interesting character because in this opera, she's at the stage of her relationship where she's been married for quite a while. She and her husband, the Count, have been together for a fair amount of time. We don't know how long, but a good while. And he's lost interest in her. And she's going through this extreme pain of feeling like he doesn't love her anymore. She can't get him to love her anymore. She doesn't know why he doesn't love her anymore. She is still doing her best to be charming and beautiful and kind. And he's just kind of, he's not being mean. He's just being absent. And he just doesn't really care. And I think, part of the reason that I always wanted to finish with the Countess is because I think that, she exemplifies something that most people have gone through at some point or another, whether it's a romantic relationship or even a friendship, where someone just like stops texting you back, stops replying to things, ghosts you, isn't interested in hearing what you have to say anymore, and you can't work out what it was that you did. And you try and fix it, but everything you try and fix makes it go wronger. And you kind of get stuck in this cycle where you just feel completely dejected by the end of it because you don't know how you can solve the problems. To give you a bit of a backstory to the opera as a whole, The Marriage of Figaro focuses on kind of 2 primary couples. There's Figaro, who is the servant, and his fiancée, Susanna, who he's going to marry, and they're kind of young, beautiful, peppy, servant-type characters. And then there is the noble couple of the Count and Countess, who are the kind of master and mistress of the house, a little bit Downton Abbey-esque, and they've been together for a while. So it's the second of 3 plays by a French playwright called Beaumarchais. And he wrote these 3 plays. And this opera is based on the second one. The first one, The Barber of Seville, was actually made into an opera by another composer called Rossini. And in that, you see the same characters. You see the Count as a young man, and you see Figaro as his kind of servant and sort of helper. And then the Countess, but she's called Rosina. She's young in that one. And the Count does everything to woo her. He's desperate to get her to love him. He does all of these like crazy schemes to get her to commit to him and be his wife. So it's really sad when you then get to see Figaro, which I always think of it as being maybe 20 years later. Now, there are lots of people that say it's not that much longer. It could be quite recently after, but I think it's kind of more poignant in many ways if there's a sense that they've had a lovely relationship for a while and it's just fallen apart over time. And the Count in this play, in this opera, is just desperately trying to get with Susanna. And that's kind of the central thing. Susanna's marrying Figaro, the Count fancies Susanna, and the Countess has to watch it. And the Countess knows that the Count is just contemplating cheating on her, like leaving her alone all the time, and she doesn't know what she can do to win him back. And really, the opera is to an extent about Figaro and Susanna, but I think it's also a lot about the Count and Countess relationship and how that develops, and because it's a comedy, it all has a happy ending at the end. So this aria, Porgi Amor, which is the first aria at the beginning of Act 2. The Countess doesn't appear at all in Act 1, just like Musetta. It's all about Susanna and Figaro. And at the beginning of Act 2, this is a legendarily horrible start to a character because there's this very long, protracted introduction where the Countess has to kind of stand on stage and listen and think, and we'll talk through that. And then she has to sing this very quiet, very sustained aria, which is a really difficult thing to get if you're nervous, if you have any kind of nervous energy, and it's the first time the audience will hear or see you. Famously, Kirita Kanawa, who's one of the most famous operatic sopranos, she sang this at the Royal Opera House when she was something like 24, 25, really, really young. And she just used to go up to the highest room at the top of the building and she used to just sing this opening phrase like 30 times until she could do it without worrying about it. Because it's such a panic. because of the way that it's written. So it starts with this expression. She says, porgi amor qualche ristoro al mio duolo, ai miei sospir, which is really kind of half of the piece. She says, porgi, love. She's speaking to love, and she asks love to pour qualche ristoro, something restoring, something, some kind of relief, al mio duolo, on my pain, ai miei sospir, on my sighs. So she's really just at this point now where she's so dejected that she's just praying that something changes and that the Count notices her again. And what I want to do is I want to kind of go through the introduction music, and I'll talk through it as we go because it's really long, it's like a minute, and then go into that first phrase and then stop and talk about the next bit. So as we play this, I've chosen a version that has full orchestra so you can hear how the different instruments interplay with one another. And I'm going to kind of talk you through this, and then we'll sing the first phrase and then we'll talk about it. Okay, here we go. So very stately, grand entrance of the Countess. Maybe she closes her door and she starts to think a little bit about her love, when they used to dance with each other, when they used to love each other. There's this very lilting melody from the violins. And it feels like she's kind of lost in thought, she's lost in a memory, and she's alone, and she's kind of feeling a little bit melancholy, but not miserable yet. And then there's this very hopeful phrase. Maybe she's heard him at the door. Is he coming to see her? She listens as hard as she can. And then she can kind of hear maybe the door slams, the footsteps go away, and she's completely dejected and miserable and totally alone. Okay, so opening phrase, almost a prayer. Please, love, please help me with this. Give me something to hold on to, something to keep me hopeful that this might not be over. So the next thing she says is she begs. She says, "O mi rendi il mio tesoro, o mi lascia almen morir." And those are the only lines for the rest of the whole aria. So she says, "O mi rendi il mio tesoro" means, oh, give me my treasure back. Give me my love back. Mi rendi, give him to me. Mio tesoro, my love, my treasure. O mi lascia almen morir, or let me die. Basically, just let me die, let it be over. Now she is a little bit dramatic, the Countess, but I think at this point it's kind of more a sense of death, like giving up, rather than like, oh, I'm going to throw myself off a bridge. It's more like, just let it be over, just let me rest, let it finish, let it end. So for her, this is this really emotional moment where she's at the final wit's end and she doesn't know what to do. So this is her prayer. We're going to go on into the O mi rendi il mio tesoro, o mi lascia almen morir the first time, and then we'll talk through how that changes as the aria progresses. Hear this light little melody again. Okay, so repeated twice, right? O mi rendi il mio tesoro, o mi lascia almen morir. Same melody both times. Going high down to low, because it's this sense, I think, that she is praying and kind of giving up by the end of it. But I think by the time she gets this moment of let me die, she then gets kind of fired up. And for the only time in the aria, she goes upwards into this really hopeful O mi lascia almen morir repeated, which ends on this top A flat. And everyone hates singing this phrase because it's long, it's sustained, and for some reason, so what we have in singing is we have different stages of the voice. We have the chest voice, which you will hear with pop singers. It's kind of la, you know, it's low. As we move up, we get through the stave, and above it is what we call the passaggio, which is where we travel from kind of mixed voice into head voice. And this phrase goes right across the passaggio. So what you'll find is voices often kind of flip, and it doesn't necessarily sit as well as you want it to. So as I said, all sopranos hate this phrase. I'm going to try and sing it for you. But I think whether or not I manage to succeed, what's important is that it does a huge crescendo up from quite quiet, oh mi lasciami morir, into this big scream, as if she's finally taking the top off and she's really letting everything out, a kind of healthy therapy scream. Okay, so I'm just going to go back a tiny bit so we have enough space to get to it. Oh yeah, there we are. That was hard. Okay, so backing track obviously failed at that point and came a little bit too early. But what we have there is something that we saw in the really high note in the Gretchen song as well, which is a fermata on the top note, which means you hold it for as long as you want. No one can make you start unless you want to. So, you know, I think this is the nice thing about having a real orchestra, is that you will be completely in sync with the conductor at this point. And this is your moment to say, I'm holding this note until I want to stop. And then we go into the next phase, which is almost like she feels embarrassed. Like she's had this outburst. Maybe, you know, she's in the castle, or, you know, whatever counts live in a palace. I don't know, some kind of big house anyway. And people have heard. Maybe she worries they've heard, and then she goes back to a very quiet prayer. So the next bit is like completely the opposite of this great big scream. She goes back to this very little, because she's just praying again to herself. And she goes on into, yeah, we'll do that bit and we'll see what you think. Okay. So you hear those little pitter-patters. And then finally, this last phrase, again, she gets a bit more confident and she prays one more time. She goes back up to that same expression she had before. Same expression. And then she builds on what she had before, which is she does a full scale up. Goes all the way up to the top again and then comes away and feels really sad about it. So let's do that bit, and then I think we'll almost be in a stage to go all the way through. This is a much shorter aria, you'll notice, but I think that it's an important aria because it sums up so much in such a tiny amount of music. So let's do this and then let's finish up after that. So that one, I think, interesting because it's one of the only moments that she really goes down low. I don't know if you could hear there, but this was an example of kind of getting towards what I was talking about with the chest voice, which is this real morir. She goes right down to almen morir. It's quite a hearty, healthy sound. And you could read that in kind of one of two ways. I think that maybe to an extent it sounds a bit darker, a bit more miserable, but on the other hand, maybe it's more steely, it's more grown up. You know, she's kind of gone from being a girl to being a woman there. And then after that moment of like slight gravity and grown-upness, she then goes back into this final prayer, repeating the same words again, begging for her love to come back to her, or else saying she's going to die. And this is the last phrase of the aria. Okay, so example of exactly what happens if you start singing without being ready. So that is, I think, a moment that is worth stopping on as well, because that's another moment of going across the passaggio. And the last time that we did it, I was so ready for it that I was really like beefed up and my singing was in the right place. That time I was like, I'll be fine, it's only a top G. But if you don't prepare as a singer, then you find that you get this kind of kind of like a squeaking squirrel sound. So let's try again and see if I can sing that for you a bit better. But what I think is nice about this bit, which I'm not doing very well at the moment, is that it's a real float. So it's a really sort of light, quiet moment, which I probably can't sing, but let's give it a go. Yeah. That was marginally better, wasn't it? My backing track obviously is massively out of sync, so why don't we go back ever so slightly and just cover the phrase before it as well, so that you get that run in. More like here. There we go. Of the beginning, the same notes that you heard at the start in the introduction, and finishing up just there with that bump, 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 those three chords, really stately, a bit like the Countess has kind of turned back into the Countess from being a person. So, you know, she enters bum, bum, bum at the very beginning, and then shuts the door and it's do, 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 do. And at the end, it's like she puts her mask back on. She's, you know, she knows that Susanna's going to enter, people are going to come in, and those three chords kind of symbolize this, okay, out of that now, back into the beginning, back into the person that I was. Okay, so this is actually a particularly hard one to make function with a backing track. So apologies for having to wait for me to kind of find my place. But again, I think it's quite a good example of what it's like to be a rehearsing singer. You know, sometimes things go right, sometimes things go wrong, but that's okay. Live shows are wonderful for that. Okay, so now we have another 2.5 minutes, 3 minutes, and this aria is about 3 minutes long. So we're going to go all the way through, as we always do at the end. And I hope you can kind of remember what I was saying in all the musical instrumental bits, because I'm not going to talk through it this time. I'm just going to try and live through it and see if you can follow the thread of the aria as the Countess goes through. Okay.